Okay, so welcome back. So I just essentially just want to go over the C++ architecture, right? So what do I mean by the C++ architecture? What I mean by that is when you basically try to compile a C++ application, what are some of the prerequisites that you need to have already done, right? What are those things that you kind of need to have? What are those essential items that you need to include within the body of your entire program? So the first thing that we have here is what we call a header file, right? So the hash include iOS stream, it's a header file. What is a header file? Well, you can think of a header file as something that essentially allows you to gain more functionality, right? To have more functionality within your entire program. So the hash include iOS stream, essentially what it allows you to access, it's this guy, right? The cout, right? Hello world. That's essentially what it allows you to see out. It allows you to have access to the cout. It also allows you, sorry, it also allows you to have access to, let me just do this. Let me just say integer number, right? So, cn, cn number. Right, so it essentially allows you to also have access to the cn, right? To the cn attribute, not attribute, but to the cn function or operator, right? So we then say j, right? So as you could have seen in the console application that this guy, essentially, let me run this again, that exactly after the hello world with no space, it's then asking for my input. So I then inputted j, and then nothing happened afterwards, right? So it's because this is one line, right? But in C++, it's not in C++, but just in computers in general. Computers are not humans, right? As a human being, you would read the first line and then you would continue on to the second line. But with computers, you need to tell them that, listen, this is the end of this line. I want you to not put the next line next to the previous line, but I want you to put it one after the other. And so the way that you actually denote that is by using this guy, right? So you're going to say using the new line character. You can use it like that, right? You can use it, okay, sorry, to the new line character, right? You can use it like that. Hello world, you're going to say maybe, I don't know, John or something, I don't know. So basically, you can use it either like that, or you can just use it, I think it's like that if I'm not mistaken. But this basically denotes a new line character, right? So these guys are called operators. We just went over, right? So these guys are known as operators. So we just went over, I think, arithmetic operators. And now we are going over these operators. So these operators essentially allow you to uh, input more things in your output console. So if you want to say, for example, after writing hello world, you maybe want to then say hello world, you look absolutely absolutely disappointing, right? You look absolutely disappointing, right? It's going to say that. It's going to say hello world, you look absolutely disappointing, and then you then maybe type in yeah. It really doesn't matter, right? So that's essentially what it allows you to do. It essentially just allows you to continue writing more. It allows you to continue basically adding more information into your output console, right? But I want to then go down to the cn, right, which is basically getting user input. So whenever you see cn, I want you to think of user input. That's essentially what it is. It's all about just getting the user input. That's what the cin essentially does. But before we even tackle the getting user input, because you are going to get the user input, what I want to do is I essentially just want to declare a string, right? I want to declare a string called name, right? The string is called name, right? And I want to basically input a name. So when I input a name, all right, let me just input my name, so Mlandi, it works perfectly fine. But what happens if I then want to say, for example, I now want to input my name and surname, right? Right? Well, the program is actually not necessarily going to compile well. Okay, let's do this. And then let's try and display basically the name variable here, right? So let's do it like this. Okay, so now we're basically going to have Mlondi Madida, right? So it's going to say, hello world, you look absolutely disappointing, Mlondi, right? So it's not basically going to include my surname. It's just going to stop at the first string. And the best way in which you can sort of circumvent this issue from happening is by using the getline function, right? So you say cin, getline. So you say cdcin, right? cdcin, and name. So when you're using the getline function, so this is basically going to be your parameters. It's going to be the cin, and then it's going to be a variable. So those are basically the two things that you are basically going to be passing into this getline function as your two sort of arguments or your parameters, right? It's going to essentially be the cin, and it's going to be the variable, or the input and the variable. So let's try to run this. And so if we run this, right, let's just say my name again, Londi Madida. Okay, you are disappointing, Londi Madida. Okay, fine. So it basically works absolutely fine. So now the thing that I want to now talk about is this std, right? The std thing. A lot of people think that that's a bit boring. They don't want to continue writing, std or whatever. So we just basically say using namespace std. So we're going to write that above, right? Above our main function, but below our header file. So when we do that, we basically can erase this std, excuse me, we can essentially erase this std, right? We can erase it, and the program is going to basically compile exactly the same way as it compiled before, because they're using namespace std. What it essentially, it allows us to replace, or not replace exactly, but it allows us to remove the std dot dot, right? It allows us to essentially do that. So that's basically what the using namespace std allows you to do. This, by the way, is not good programming practice, but you can do this for like small scale projects, such as if maybe say like you are getting user input, if maybe say you're creating a program that will display a multiplication table, if you are displaying or you're creating a program that will check if a particular condition is met and will then output a particular thing, you can then use namespace or using namespace std. But if you're using it, or if you're creating a program that is basically going to be too complicated, it's going to basically include a lot of header files, it's basically going to have a lot of functions, then you kind of should not use the using namespace std, because that will result in a naming conflict. But that's basically the overview of just the architecture of C++. How do you get user input? How do you display something out in the console? What the hell is the hash include iOS stream? what is using namespace std, what is this, like what are these curly braces, right? This is an integer main function, right? It's a function that we use to basically write the body of our program. That's the thing that we use, right? We're going to go over functions, but for now, that's just what I want us to basically look at for the architecture of C++.